welcome to Breezin with Bierman, the podcast, a Princetonian Now Media Group production. As always, our aim is to educate, inform, entertain, and tell you, the people, what is trending. If you like what you hear on Breezin with Bierman, the podcast, we're going to be on Spotify, iCloud, Apple iTunes, soon to be on YouTube. Many hashtags. Please listen to us. Today's guest is a local pediatrician in Princeton, New Jersey. She's actually is in my dad's old pediatric group. Why? We came to Princeton, New Jersey while I was born here. She's been on the forefront of advocating for Princeton public school students to get back in the classroom much sooner than later. And to that end, there's a petition out now. And as someone who I just said earlier, she's entered the vortex of politics, schools, and kids. I give you credit. I welcome Dr. Helen Rose. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Adam. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, we'll start off, we'll get background later, but why do you support now getting these kids back to school?
Well, there are several reasons. First of all, I'm a mom of 4 kids. And in the spring, I really saw how difficult it was for them to be at home alone, so isolated. And then, I started to see it in my classroom, in my room, at the office. I started to see more and more kids who were anxious and sad. And then it became very clear from a lot of the data coming in that classrooms can be safe and kids can be safe and teachers can be safe in the schools, safer than in the communities. So I started to feel like this really makes sense. They're being harmed at home and schools are safe. So why don't we have a very clear-cut plan to go back to school? It's a controlled setting. There's been no transmission in our schools. We're doing many mitigation factors in our schools. And then, how has it been bad for kids outside of school specifically? I am seeing skyrocketing cases of depression and anxiety.
Do you see them does it affect you personally? They come into your office, they go into the the private room, and then you see them melt down? What are you seeing?
They're just, it depends on the day, because sometimes I'll have a day where it's one child after the other is having a hard time. I'll have they cry. There are a lot of tearful kids.
High school students, middle school, all ages?
So I'm seeing extreme anxiety in little kids, like elementary age, where they're worried. I'm seeing kids worried to lay down on the table without mom helping them lay down.
Oh my God.
5. I'm seeing middle school kids being so anxious that they're just totally irrational, and parents are worried about getting them hospitalized at 12.
All due to isolation led by COVID.
Yeah. Wow. I'm saying the teenagers, the high school kids are sad, anxious, needing to be put on medicines, suicidal. And some days are better than others. But some days it's like every patient. And then this, by the way, I'm not an advocate for adults, I'm an advocate for kids, but the parents are really very sad seeing this and they don't know what to do. They're distraught.
So I have to interrupt. It's safe to say you're on the front line. So you're authentically saying what you see. You live it every day. You have your own family and your patients. And then that's why you feel this way.
Well, from what I see, and then I start to read about it. Is this what's really going on all over the place? And it is.
In the literature, are we talking JAMA, New England Medical Journal, on up?
Yeah. Suicidal ideation is going up, increased suicide attempts in several emergency rooms. The American Academy of Pediatrics saying, it's better for kids to be at school with mitigation efforts, of course, but better for kids to be at school. The CDC is saying that, on top of it, no one is saying that remote school has been terrific.
Right.
No one's saying it's good. They're saying we're stuck with it, but no one's saying it's better or good for our kids.
You're on the record for saying the current hybrid mode of learning is affecting the quality of education, impacting our children, and it falls short of the standards expected for Princeton schools. That's what you that's what you feel. So what I'm getting from you is, I know you. I was going to ask, aren't you afraid of kids getting COVID? You're more afraid of the other health issues associated with it.
So as a physician, every time you have to prescribe a medicine or give a vaccine, you always have to consider the pros and cons. I'm not going to give a vaccine that maybe works, but causes a bunch of harm. That doesn't make any sense just because people are afraid of the illness. Fewer, when we started the vaccine for chickenpox, fewer kids have died of COVID than of chickenpox that year.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Right.
it's too many children, but it's a dangerous thing when you increase mental illness in children.
Right.
5 to 8% of people who have mental illness die from suicide. So, mental illness is a serious thing that we shouldn't play with.
And then tell me then, what about the CDC recommendations, and why don't we follow their strict guidelines, which are somewhat evolving?
Right. So the CDC is really terrific. But the CDC, their goal is to decrease the incidence of COVID. Period.
Right.
End of sentence. So they're not able to really monitor and say, well, what if 100% of the people followed our guidelines 100% of the time? What would happen? That's
what their mentality.
And families.
Right,
that's us as schools. Like, we all have to decide, okay, well, what's the downside of having kids at school, at home, like every other week, every day, for 6 hours in front of screen time?
I got it. So that's their mindset. Like my dad's mindset when he talked to a patient, how can I avoid my kid getting hurt playing sports? Well, then don't play sports. But of course, that's not going to happen.
Right.
You have to make those judgments.
Right. Everything you do has risk. For some families, it's worth risks. For some families, it's not. I have very few patients that I truly believe it's better for them to be at home. And even the one that I'm thinking of, I'm not 100% convinced. But,
So
one last thing I didn't mention is just the screen time that these kids are getting.
Myopia, you said.
Myopia is increasing. We know that. We know they have more access to websites they shouldn't have. Little kids who their parents were doing no screen time during the week are doing 5 hours every day.
That's a big change. That's not healthy.
Huge change. It's nothing we ever thought as a society was okay before.
Right.
And I think that for a lot of these things, we haven't done the studies to know the negative side effects. But we do know that 10,000 children, listen to this, this is so crazy. 10,000 children between the ages of 5 and 17 have to get COVID for one child to die.
I see. That's kind of acceptable. Those are facts. We're dealing in facts, not speculation, not.
Right.
Not
so I went on the CDC like 3 days ago, and I wrote down the number of cases and then the number of deaths by age group. So, from 0 to 4, over 400,000 children got COVID, 89 died from it. 5 to 17, 2 million children got COVID, 187 died from it.
Yeah, you wouldn't stop life.
99.99% survived. That doesn't mean it's okay for those kids' families. That doesn't mean it's okay, but what you have to say is, to prevent that one death, are you causing?
Right.
What are you causing? What's happening?
There's always an acceptable risk. Like vaccines always have an acceptable level of, and then you have them. So this is very compelling. It's funny, again, I'm just going to muse how facts get lost. Again, this is an emotional thing. I said it's school, politics. There's a certain amount of rumor mongering, hysteria. People get in their own political trenches. It's a quagmire at times. What would Dr. Rose, before I get to my other question too, it's kind of combined. What is your frustration with, or what do you like about the Board of Education and their policies, Princeton Public Schools, and the superintendent. I'm sure you have some frustrations. What would Dr. Rose, what is a common sense, practical way to get kids back into school? What would Dr. Rose's plan be?
I think, number one, the Board of Education has been super, super successful when they create a committee that says we're going to get this done. So, for example, they felt that it was important to change the name of the school for many good reasons. They had a committee. There were people who felt like it wasn't a good idea. It was going to cost money. I'm sure there was pushback for different reasons. They have to get new uniforms or whatever. But they created the committee. They got the kids involved. They had families involved, and they got it done.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
When a pandemic was going on, they had to hire a new superintendent. They did a fantastic job. They did a very thorough job. They took their time. They hired someone great who's qualified, who's coming this summer. Why don't we have a committee that says we're going to get our kids back to school, and we're going to do it in a safe way, and get people on that committee, get the mayor to get involved, to say when the superintendent says tents aren't going to work because of regulations or permits, get the mayor involved, like come at it from your goal. Don't come at it from your fears and from the roadblocks. Decide what you're going to do and do it.
And you're saying, I see, even though there's unions and there's health issues and there's legality and and harvest the intelligentsia, use all the talent we have there in a nonpartisan way. And I like that, though, that when I talk to construction workers, they always say you start from what you want to have happen and then you work backwards. It doesn't always, right.
And I feel like and listen, I mean, please, I think everybody must feel like I'm the most judgmental person in the world. I'm not. It's so difficult. And the position the board has been put in, and the new superintendent coming on, they care and they're working hard. But the bottom line is, to that child in their room alone day after day after day, and every time more hope is taken from that child, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much experience the board has. It doesn't matter how hard they're trying. None of that matters to that child.
Right.
And so I'm done. I mean, it's a year. It's a year. Right. And they really should have had a plan in September. There was data out that schools were safe. I was at board meetings in August, and they just have not decided that they want the children back in school full time.
Well, that leads to some voices from the crowd. What would I want to go back to, what would you see the classroom like? Would it be 6 feet plexiglass? How could it be done with the common sense way?
Here's what I think. So ideal is every single mitigation strategy and every single child back in the school. So that's the ideal, getting all of that, right? So then what happens if you can have the kids 5 feet 11 inches from each other, and you can get them all back in the schools? Maybe that's worth it. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not advocating for 1 foot apart just for the heck of it. I'm saying we have to look at these things, and we have to say we must educate our children, and we must do it in the safest way possible. But we must educate our children in person in the classroom, because every single one of us, including every single teacher, knows that it's not best for kids to be at home.
Right. So
nobody's fighting that. They're just saying we don't want to do it.
So what I'm getting from you, we have the data. It's worth the risk. We can do the mitigation strategy. This could be done. That's what I'm getting from you. It's somewhat of a.
It can be, and it's about, they do it. They're doing it in Hopewell. The charter school, the kids are in every week.
Right.
4 days a week.
Stewart Country Day too. I mean, yeah, I agree. I wonder what's, okay. Can we do voices from the crowd? These are questions. I'm not saying you can have all the answers to them, and maybe they're unanswerable. You want to hear the negative one first?
Sure.
Dr. Rose must have PTSD. She sees a bunch of patients who are having meltdowns. Maybe they're not resilient, or they're kept in the womb by their parents, and she's overreacting. I don't know if you can answer that one, but.
Yeah, it's funny when I get the most upset about it. I do wonder, you know, I do go to the worst case scenario in my head, which is why I then pull up the numbers and look up what's really going on. And we really are seeing so many signs that children's mental health is going down the toilet. And, you know, we saw it at the last board meeting where all over 1,000
Oh, yeah.
people came to the meeting
Until midnight, they were
until
taking phone
midnight,
calls.
high school students tearing up, you know, in public and saying how stressed they are and how they can't take it anymore. And all of the pediatricians talk about it. It's just a fact. And you know, I feel like the isolation at home is a huge contributing factor. And it has to be, you know, like I look at my I didn't even know who's anywhere today, but you know, I have my middle schooler downstairs and I he's just sitting on the couch just staring at the screen with just a
Wow.
sad look on his face for the last 3 hours.
As a parent, that'd be very
Yeah.
disconcerting and troubling. And then you start worrying, what's going on in that head? What's happening? Yeah, exactly. I'm being told by my producer, unfortunately, we can't get to more voices from the crowd. But why don't you take this moment to tell us about your petition, what websites they can go to, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much. So let me grab the websites.
Take your time. Okay.
So we're on change.org. And
change.org. I like to repeat things for the audience.
yes. And so let me pull that up.
Or if you want, you can send it to my producer, and he can put it on when we put the podcast on.
Can we do that? You know why?
Yeah.
Because it's like a link, and
that's a better way to go.
Yeah. So
okay,
basically, we have an email people can ask questions to, and we have the change.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Rose. You've been a passionate advocate. Even detractors, pro or con, no one can dispute your passion. I think fact-based. And I'd be really interested to see where we are at in June, and hopefully everyone back to school in September. And I was going to ask you a prediction. We ran out of time. This has been Breezing with Bierman, the podcast, a Princetonian Now media production. Today we had Dr. Helen Rose speaking, a pediatrician, local pediatrician in Princeton, New Jersey, talking about getting kids back into our public schools. It's been a very insightful, emotional, and passionate conversation. I thank you again, Dr. Rose.
Thank you.